Hi, this is Kaushik Ranchod here. Welcome to our immigration show. Today, what I'm going to share with you are important insights about when you should apply with the marriage-based green card, the K-1, and the immigrant visa. Now, why is this important? Because one strategy can make the difference between an approval or a denial. So you will want to stay tuned till the end to make sure you can know what option, first of all, will not get you banned, and then second of all, what could be the fastest way. So I'm going to talk about typically what the fastest process is, the Fiancé visa. The Fiancé visa, the situations where you've met your fiancé and you've decided to get married within 90 days. Hopefully that brings there's a lot of love in your life during this period, and you've decided, well, okay, I want to get married. Now, this is different than being married. The reason that this is different than being married is because that's a whole different process, either the immigrant visa or the marriage-based green card process, which we will get into. What we're going to talk about here still is the Fiancé visa process where you are not married. Now, this is really important because if you're starting the Fiancé visa process and then you decide to get married, boom, that creates a problem. You'll have to do a whole nother process. So we want to stay, if you stay in the lane of the Fiancé visa process, you want to stay in that lane all the way until the end and then apply for the marriage-based green card after you enter the United States. You get married to your US citizen, you must get married within 90 days. Now, if you don't get married within 90 days, that's a whole nother topic for another video, but that could create some problems for you. Assuming you get married within 90 days, then you apply for the marriage-based green card in the United States. So that's one key difference with the Fiancé visa, is that the Fiancé visa doesn't get you a green card. It allows you to get a visa to enter the United States, to get married and eventually stay permanently. So then you might ask, well, why would I want to apply for a Fiancé visa rather than a green card? Great question. The reason here is because one, it's typically faster than an immigrant visa. It's right now, if you look at the I-130 processing times for the immigrant visa, it is taking anywhere from 13 to about 17 and a half months. Now, these times are always changing just for that first step, the I-130 process to be approved. Whereas the Fiancé visa will typically be approved in less than a year. And these times are always fluctuating and are dependent upon US government processing times. No attorney, nobody has control over how fast those times move. It's up to the government. Of course, if you have an application that is prepared correctly, initially, that's going to prevent a request for evidence, which could slow down your case, or a denial, which then you have to start all over, as long as there's not something that completely derails your case. All right, so back to the Fiancé visa requirements. One of the requirements that is extremely important is that you have to have met within the last 2 years. So you must have met, and the way that you show that is through passport entry stamps, plane tickets. Those are two primary forms of evidence showing that you've met within the last 2 years. You also want to show that you have a real relationship. This is extremely important. This is where I see a lot of mistakes happen, is that you may think, well, I'm a US citizen, and so, that's enough in and of itself. Well, it's not. You have the burden of proof of demonstrating that you have a real relationship. So you might ask, well, how do I do that? So when you go visit your fiancé, having photos of you and your fiancé together are forms of evidence. Evidence of correspondence, evidence of gifts you may have sent. Any wedding preparations is also very good as well. Also, you also need to have a statement explaining what happened with your entire relationship, how it progressed, and the fact that you intend to get married within 90 days. Additionally, if you or your fiance has criminal issues, specifically your fiance. If your fiance has criminal issues, then you want to talk to an immigration lawyer, because there may be some grounds that prevent you from coming into the United States, or you may need a waiver. If you as a US citizen have some certain very specific types of criminal records, then you also will want to talk to a lawyer too, to see if you can get a waiver to overcome those specific criminal issues. Now, with the fiancé visa, your fiancé is outside of the United States. So at the beginning of the process, the first step in that process is the K-1 petition that's filed, the I-129F that's filed with the USCIS. And after that I-129F is approved, it then goes to the National Visa Center. National Visa Center does background checks, and you'll also have to submit additional documentation with the National Visa Center and the U.S. Embassy process. Some of the additional documentations are the I-134 affidavit of support, the DS form that your fiancé abroad will need to complete, and additional documentation. You'll want to look at the U.S. Embassy website to see what those specific requirements are, because also every embassy has unique specific requirements. You'll also need police clearance documents. Generally, they'd like to see that as well, showing that you don't have any criminal issues as well in the places that you've resided for more than 6 months. With the fiancé visa process, then at the very end of the process, you go to the interview. That's where the joint documents are extremely important. So that's where you're going to demonstrate that you have a real relationship, and the way that they determine that is by 1, looking at your joint documents, and then 2, asking you questions just about your relationship. Then after that, you enter the United States, as I mentioned earlier, then you get married, then you apply for adjustment of status, the green card process. So let's compare that now to the marriage-based green card process. So the marriage-based green card process is where you're already married. So you have a spouse in the United States, and you will want to consider this option if your spouse is already in the United States. There's no reason you would apply for a K-1 visa. You could also consider applying for an immigrant visa if your spouse was going back to their home country. So in that situation, I'm going to switch gears here and talk about the immigrant visa, because I think it's pretty clear cut. If your spouse is in the United States, it's pretty clear cut that you know that you would want to go ahead and apply for the marriage-based green card, unless your spouse came in with the intent to permanently stay in the United States. Then you need to do the immigrant visa process. I'm going to compare now the fiancé visa adjustment of status to the immigrant visa. The immigrant visa is basically the green card process where your spouse is abroad. So the first step in that process is the I-130 petition, where you demonstrate you have a real relationship. So you want to provide joint documents in that I-130. What the trends are is an increased scrutiny on wanting these joint documents. Let's say about 10 years ago, I was noticing that they weren't really so stringent upon having these joint documents at the I-130 petition stage. They wanted it at the end of the process. Now they want it, what I'm noticing is that they want to see that in the initial filing as well with the I-130. You demonstrate you have a valid marriage, and you submit that I-130 petition. That's taking, as I mentioned, around 13 to 17 months, which is an extremely long time. Hope to see those times go down, but that's what it is as of now. They're always changing. You can look that up at uscis.gov under processing times to go in and then look at the specific service center your specific geographic location applies to. So, for instance, if you live in California, we'll want to look at what service center would you apply to if you live in California, and you can see that chart on the uscis.gov website. Depending upon where you live, will determine where you apply. And will also depend upon the processing times. They differ depending upon what service center you're applying to. All right, so moving on forward here, after the I-130 process, then once the case is approved, you file at the additional documentation at the National Visa Center. This is where it's extremely important to demonstrate also that as the U.S. citizen, you are able to sufficiently support your spouse. Now, the key difference here also is that you as a U.S. citizen are able to apply for your spouse abroad and as a permanent resident. But if you're a permanent resident, What's important to note is that you're going to be also subject to the Visa Bulletin. So you want to look at the Visa Bulletin to determine whether or not your priority dates are current. So back to the affidavit of support requirements and the public charge requirements, you need to show that your spouse is not going to be a public charge. So there's the affidavit of support I-864 form. There's also documentation that you need to demonstrate that now with the new requirements that have come out, that your spouse is going to be self-sufficient. So some of the things that they look at are they going to have health insurance, or will they be getting health insurance? Do they have a credit report? And this is an additional requirement that wasn't there before, also looking at whether or not they've taken certain types of public benefits in the past. So after you jump that NVC hurdle, now I'm going to back up gears here. Another difference here is that instead of the I-134 form with the fiancé visa, there's the I-864 form. So there's some different forms with the spousal immigrant visa versus the K-1 visa. Okay, now you get scheduled for the interview after the National Visa Center process. This is where they want to determine whether or not you have a real relationship. And keep in mind, these interviews go very fast. So you'll want to, just like the fiancé visa, bring the joint documents to your interview. And this goes as well as with the marriage-based green card. Any of these interviews, bring your joint documents to the interview. All right, so you bring the joint documents to the interview. They're also going to make that they could review your financial documents again to determine whether or not you're going to be a public charge, whether you're going to be self-sufficient. And then they're going to also look at, is there anything what's called a ground of inadmissibility that makes you not eligible to come to the United States? And some of the examples of that is, let's say you have a certain type of crime, or if there was any kind of misrepresentation, fraud or misrepresentation in the past. In that situation, you may be eligible for I601 waiver. And you do the immigrant visa also if you've entered without inspection. You can also apply for I601A waiver in this situation as well. You have the interview, and then after the interview, then you are allowed to enter, and you enter as a green card holder. So another key difference between here with the immigrant visa and the fiancé visa is that you're coming in with a green card where you're able to live in the United States permanently as long as you don't violate any terms of the green card. You don't need to jump through another hurdle. You can work with the green card, and you can travel on the green card. With the fiancé visa, you need to apply for work authorization if you want to work, which typically doesn't make sense because you're going to get married to a US citizen right away. So then you're going to apply for the marriage-based green card where you can apply for work authorization. All right, well, I hope this video served you, where we talked about some of the key differences with the fiancé visa, the immigrant visa, the marriage-based green card. If you like this video, please press the like button and share it with 2 people that you think may need this video, because it's important that you stay informed and you know what you're doing. And I invite you also to post any comments or questions below. Thank you, and have an amazing day. Bye.